I heard the news that one of the former uh, guiding teachers for ICD, Beth Mulligan, she's okay, but she was involved in a car accident, and looks like coming down the mountain. I think toward Banning, between her home up on the hill and Banning, looking from what I don't know exactly. She is um, she is okay, but she has suffered some injuries, cuts, bruises. I don't know specifics. I do know that she is home and not in critical condition, but certainly was involved in a major accident. And I wanted to let everybody know about that. I heard from Larry Yang, and I also had a note from Ian Chalice, both of whom are traveling right now, but they had heard, and so I wanted to pass it along to the sangha. Beth did, of course, so much for ICD and was so keenly involved for such a long time. And if you wish to send her, if you have a contact and or an email or phone, or you wanted to send her a message, then feel encouraged or empowered to do so, of course. I just wanted to share that. I'm relieved that she will recover from it, because apparently it was a very bad accident, so dangerous on mountain roads, and well, just on roads in general. But yeah, that was on my mind, and I thought I would share that with you. A reminder that we live in a chaotic and impermanent world. Right? We have sometimes have an appearance of permanence or of stability, but certainly by nature the world is chaotic and impermanent, and that was the driver for certainly the Buddha, and really for all people that come to Dharma practice. It's a curious itch, the drive to involve ourselves in whether we identify as a Buddhist or not, but to involve ourselves in the practice of contemplation and light meditation, where we are really coming, we're looking at our lives and this curious, mysterious reality really head on, right? With head on or directly, without having to use filters in which to experience the world. And meditation is also a courageous practice. I mentioned a noble practice earlier, but I think it takes courage also to see things as they are, to practice with things as they are. I think it was this past Tuesday when we had a Tuesday evening meeting. It might have been last Sunday. I don't know. Some time ago, and I brought up we had more of a discussion and questions and sharing at the beginning, and then I pretty much ended with a writing from the Gateless Gate, which is a Zen collection, a collection of Zen koans, which was written by a monk called Mumon. Mumon wrote this collection of koans called the Gateless Gate, 48 Zen cases, and added commentaries and verses to them. And at the end of the book, interestingly, he added some Zen warnings. After working through the collection, there are some Zen warnings, and I wanted to sort of explore that a little more in this evening's talk. Koans are interesting aspects of Zen practice. I heard recently that a Zen teacher, I think it was Henry Schuckman, described koans as sitting in fertilizer. Like you're kind of like sitting in fertilizer for the mind. Like koans can act like as a catalyst, something that can help provoke deeper inquiry. And the reason that they appear so abstract or downright contradictory and difficult to express in language, is koans talk about reality from a standpoint of not from a dualistic standpoint. Easier to say what it isn't than what it is. Our usual dualistic framework is understanding things in a makes sense intellectual way. So when we hear koans in the Zen tradition, they can appear or do appear illogical or contradictory because it's what Dogen would call a statement from within the principle. And that principle is a principle of non-duality and duality functioning within non-duality. Often as human beings, we're just living a very dualistic, with a very dualistic operating system, basically. We're navigating, that's the typical default human way. In sitting practice, then we immerse ourselves in a non-dual principle, a non-dualistic principle. That's really what's at the heart of this brief meditation guidance at the beginning that says, let go of preferences within the content. Let go of making differences between what we might call my thoughts and their noise. Right? Something happening out there, something happening in here. When we sit and allow things to be as they are, internally and externally, we are disrupting the tendency to split, separate, categorize, weigh, and judge. And that brings us into alignment with a deeper, another aspect of present awareness, which is not split and not separated and not dualistic. With that said, here are Mumon's pithy Zen warnings. So those of us who've been sitting together for a long time and practicing Zen meditation, here are, and for everybody else too, maybe even if it's for your first time, here's some Zen warnings which can be applied to Dharma practice and delivered in a typical 13th or 12th century Chinese, no messing about, pithy Zen style. All right, I'll just preface it with that. Okay, the first one is, to obey rules and regulations is to tie yourself up without a rope. To obey rules and regulations is to tie yourself up without a rope. All of these, this is where things immediately start to sound perhaps contradictory. I know living at a Zen center, there are a lot of rules and regulations. For those of when we do retreat, there are rules and regulations. When we go to the Mazel Center, there's rules and regulations. And darn it, there's rules and regulations just for our Zoom meeting, right? There's a code of conduct. There's an accepted way to be and to operate amongst other people. But Mumon says to obey rules and regulations is to tie yourself up without a rope. Now, as we know, as human beings, we have rules and regulations, but how is it when we either blindly accept rules and regulations or we cling to rules and regulations, right? We hold fast to an idea of the rules and how things should be, and then we brook no deviation from that. In religious practice, in Buddhist practice, because it's made up of people, this is a shadow side of when you have a community that lives and practices together. There are rules and regulations, and although those rules and regulations are meant to guide and foster the practice of the sangha, they can be misused, right? And we can see how this works generally just in our everyday life. How rules and regulations ought to be there to serve and be of benefit. But as human beings, we can often use rules and regulations to oppress and to hold things, and to manipulate. So that's our first Zen warning: is be careful with obeying rules and regulations. The next line, though, says to act freely and without restraint is heresy and devilry. Interesting word choices, right? Heresy and devilry. Sounds a little, well, maybe like very religious kind of word choices, how it's translated. Another way we could put this is to act freely and without restraint. That's wrong too, right? So if we follow the rules and regulations too tightly, we cling to rules and regulations too much, then we go astray, we say, in practice. And if we abandon all rules and regulations and just have a anything goes attitude, then we also go astray. We can apply this to our meditation practice. We have guidelines for how to sit and how to practice with the mind and the body. They're good guidelines. They provide a nice general orientation and point towards something. But if we hold to them too tightly, then they become a barrier. We take the other side and we say, you know what, I'm not going to follow any method. I'm not going to be following any rules and guidelines here. I'm just going to make it up as I go along. Well, also that has its problems too. Okay, next one. To be aware of the mind, making it pure and quiet, is the false Zen of silent illumination. To be aware of the mind and make it pure and quiet is a false Zen of silent illumination. Zen, in its early days in Chan, China, split into two groups, or two ways of approaching. Okay, so if we look at our modern times and think about the awful division and polarity that we have with a kind of a one side versus the other, well, that's as old as time in human society, right? We often have that rivals split into two camps. So even in the heart of a spiritual practice as old as Chan or Zen Buddhism, you had rival schools saying, you're doing it wrong. No, you're doing it wrong. Right? In China, there's the Northern School and the Southern School, which was also called the Gradual School and the Sudden School. The Gradual School practiced meditation in an effort to deepen, refine, and polish our concentration, mindfulness, polish that inquiry, right? So slowly and steadily making improvement. That's one side. That's the gradual school. The sudden school is like, that's all nonsense. You be awake now. Be enlightened now. Don't worry about method. Just wake up. Make the leap. Seize it now. Gradual versus sudden. Mumon says, I think he's more in the sudden camp here. To be aware of the mind and make it pure and quiet is not Zen, is a false Zen. This points to, meditation is so broad. Buddhism is so broad. Dharma practice is so broad. There are different approaches and different ways. But so often people will come to, say, the Zen center and will have a practice and a meditation practice which is more oriented to producing deep samadhi or concentrated states, right? What he's calling pure and quiet, very concentrated, certain levels of samadhi. And my feeling is, practice with your affinity. Practice in a way that your heart and mind aligns with. But in Zen, we don't emphasize trying to have a pure and quiet mind. We emphasize practicing with the mind that you have now. And often that mind, well, pure is a difficult word. You could argue it's pure all of the time in one level. But if you take purity in its more commonly accepted way, where a pure mind would be not angry, would be calm, would be benevolent, would be compassionate, would be open, pure, quiet, right? That sounds very nice, but as human beings, that's just often not the way our mind presents. Again, unless that's just me, and you are, I think, sitting thinking, Jokai, my mind is as pure and quiet as a spring breeze. I don't know what you're talking about with this disturbance. I have ascended to the pure land with the Buddhas. If so, good. Thank you for your practice. Please teach us the way, right? Because like in my scrambling decades of working at this, any condition of mind is temporary. The only permanent condition of mind is that it appears as this. It's always this now. It's always been this now. Since consciousness arose in this particular lump of flesh and sinew, it's always been this. It's always this way. And this is expressed very differently dependent on causes and conditions. So the Zen way is to sit with things as they are. Even if there is a circus has come to town between the ears, right? Sometimes it's that way. But our practice is to allow that too, and to sit with things as they are. Really to the point, then, of being undisturbed by the content. Busy mind, no problem. Quiet mind, no problem. Noisy street, no problem. Sound of birds, no problem. That reminds me of pure and quiet. Many years ago, we had a session or a training period up here in the mountains, and we had a pair of ravens living here that reared a brood. I saw them recently, but we would often have ravens living here, and they bring up the young ones. And I don't know if you've ever been around young ravens, but they are boisterous and they squawk, and they refuse to leave home. The parents start ignoring them, and they're fully grown and they're just squawking, asking for food, until eventually they get the message and leave. But it takes a long time. We're not so different than, you may relate to this on a human level. And we were sitting in the meditation hall in a session, and the person at the time who was the head trainee, so they're in the spotlight role, I could hear these ravens squawking, and at the end of the meditation period, he jumped up from his seat and walked outside the hall, and he picked up a stone and he threw it at the tree, and he was like, "Get out of here! Go on, get out of here!" And and it's just like, wow, no, that's not what we do. We don't throw rocks at the birds. We sit and we allow the birds to squawk. And in our minds, we may be thinking, please stop that. But much better, if we want to take the straight path to relieving suffering, then you just allow the juvenile raven, to squawk, and you continue to sit. Is that pure and quiet? Well, you can say relatively, no, it's not pure and quiet. If you can fully allow the content of your meditation to be as it is, regardless of conditions, then yes, it is always pure and quiet, even when the volume's turned up to 11. To arbitrarily ignore causal relations is to fall into a deep pit. It reminds me, the Buddha said many things, but one thing he said, short and pithy, was see the emptiness, study cause and effect. Study emptiness, see the emptiness is what we're talking about when I talk about Zazen, letting all of this discriminatory thinking fall away, having no concern for the conditions. That is how one ultimately sees emptiness. But you see it in a way which is more of a in the bones seeing than a through the eyes seeing. Okay, so to ignore causal relations is to fall into a deep pit. I don't think anyone here needs a lesson in that. I think we understand that if we ignore cause and effect, then there's going to be some problems. Right? Just try not paying your rent or your mortgage or you know, any number of examples of cause and effect. You know, I'm thinking all of my examples in my head are bills right now. Your car registration or your, you know, but if you ignore cause and effect, it's a problem. Maybe that was more of a thorny issue for those who had become monks or nuns and were, you know, living in a different type of relative world. But for us, I think that one's very clear. Okay, to abide in absolute awakening is to wear chains and a yoke. Okay, so to abide in absolute awakening. I think I said last time when I briefly touched on these Zen warnings, I don't know how many of us this is affecting as a malaise. You know, that are we dwelling in absolute awakening? I see some awesome facial expressions in answer to that, right? But there are times in spiritual practice, in Dharma practice, that we may have a deep insight or a deep experience, and that, you know, is often clung to. And that happens with people. I've seen it happen many times on retreats or at the Zen Center. People will have, you know, a deep insight, and then it's good advice to say, don't marry your insight. Because anything that we can hold on to in terms of a deep experience or an idea of what we've achieved in the spiritual realm, that milk will turn sour quickly. Right, so there's that's a warning about that. Thinking of good and evil is being stuck in heaven or hell. Interesting one. Thinking of good and evil. All right. I mean, we could look at this about when we look into the world and how things are, we all have a good working definition of what's good and what's bad. I'm sure, right? Oh, you know, these are kind of blunter ways to put it, good and evil. I'd just say, you know, maybe we could just say good and bad. There's good and bad. That's for sure. And if we're stuck in that formula and inflexible, then we have problems. We split the world into two. If we decide, well, usually the problem is everybody decides they're on the side of good. You know, in the polarity of good and bad, everybody thinks they're on the good side, but half think you know I'm trying to say there, like those people are bad, these people are good. And if everybody's thinking that, then we've got that split, we've got that problem. So that's another warning of like, be careful about just getting stuck in those fixed positions about what's good and what's bad. Sure, we can make good generalizations and have a good idea, but leave some room for exceptions and leave some room for rapprochement and leave some room for a path to redemption, right? So good and bad, we ought to be careful about holding those too tightly, or thinking that we know, or we understand and we're certain about what's good and bad. Life's much more complicated and nuanced than to fall into these kind of simplistic formulas. Okay, couple more. I'll keep going. To have ideas about the Buddha and Dharma is to be imprisoned inside two iron mountains. To have ideas about the Buddha and Dharma is to be imprisoned within iron mountains. That could be quite a shocking statement. Again, a very Zen statement. Zen likes to challenge and say things which is quite edgy, you know. But if we venerate somebody called the Buddha, this immaculate being who's out there somewhere or used to live in India, right? Some extraordinary godlike person who we can never be like, but we can bow to and offer incense to and raise up and treat in that way, then, you know, we've left the path of Zen and we're dealing in a type of religion, right? We're putting something out there which is holy and profound, and then we're down here broken and disheveled, right? So, and then with the Dharma, if we imagine the Dharma is some magical, mystical, wonderful, out of reach thing, and we create that distance, then we're not benefiting from the Dharma. In Zen, we say it's much better to, you know, the Buddha and the Dharma, that's this. I'm looking at 24 Buddhas. The ones I can see in 3D, those are easier to, you know, the ones who are, you know, if you're just a name on the little black box, I'm going to assume you're there, right? But we are, everyone is that. That attests to what the Buddha exclaimed upon becoming enlightened and seeing the morning star. I, all beings, the great earth. I, all beings, the great earth. So everyone is a Buddha. Many of us have not realized that yet. Right? We're on that path of practice and realization to realizing our innate awakeness, our innate Buddhahood. The Buddha was Siddhartha Gautama, you know, a prince or a noble from a noble family in India, a human being. Spent his whole life as a human being. Also became the Buddha, an awakened one. We are also awakened ones, awakened to this, what the Buddha said, awakened to thus. But there's a gradation and there's a depth of realization of that. And we're somewhere in our process on the path to enlightenment, to deeper realization. And the Dharma is all around us. This is the Dharma now. This is our Dharma exchange, our Dharma meeting. Sitting is an expression of Dharma. This book, we could say, is an expression of Dharma. My, you know, poor words or clumsy words my attempt at an expression of Dharma. But the most important is the translation that happens within yourself. How do you translate these words, these insights, or these comments? How do they land for you? And what can you glean from that in terms of encouragement and benefit in your lived experience? That's the only Dharma that's important. Don't have them be abstract terms that mean something divorced from this gritty reality that we're living. Becoming aware of consciousness at the instant it arises is just toying with the mind. Mumon loves to attack deep meditative absorption states, right? And say, if you can really drill down, sit for long periods, become very quiet, and look at the mind and see, almost like, a thought bubbling up from a dark pool of stillness. It just, like a little bubble of oxygen comes up from the floor of the pond and breaks on the surface of consciousness. And we're sitting and we're thinking, yeah, I'm there. I think I've found it, right? I'm there. I'm at the point of creation. I'm at the, at the Yokoji, that's when the pine cone falls on your head, or down in the city, that's when, the car backfires on the street. But something will usually come and disavow us of that kind of thing. And after all, any sort of state that we find ourselves in is a temporary condition. So we can enjoy it, let it go. If it's difficult, experience it, let it go. If it's easy, that's nice, let it go. Right? But the Dharma is about moving forward. We say it's right now, but you can't never put a pin in right now. Right now is not a place or a thing. It's an action. Now is unfolding faster than our eyes or our minds can reach and grasp. The world already moved. As soon as you try and appraise it, it changed. It's always one step in front. Right? So that's a wonderful thing, because a realization in that way is always stepping forward in the action of discovery and realization, an inquiry, not resting on the laurels of some idea of what it means or what we may have discovered. That can be filed away in a dark drawer. The world is full right now. Let's get on with what's next. Practicing concentration and quiet sitting is an action of devils. Okay, so he really rubs this part in. Mumon doesn't want us sitting there quietly trying to find greater depth of concentration. All right, so I'll conclude his warnings here. I'm just going to read this short last paragraph through. If you go forward, you lose the essence. If you go backwards, you oppose the truth. If you neither go forward nor backwards, you're a dead person breathing. So tell me now, what is it that you will do? Make the utmost effort to attain realization completely in this lifetime, and don't let yourself circulate karma forever. And that's how Mumon ends his volume of koans. I love that. It's like, you can't go back. You can't go forward. So when I say, you know what, just keep moving forward, Mumon's like, no. Don't listen to that guy. You can't go back, you can't go forward, and you can't stay right here. Where are you going to go? He cuts off all the escape routes and tears up any nest that we might sit in. There's nowhere to go. Where will you go? There's nothing to do. What will you do? Right? So cutting off those ways that we might try and escape or describe or settle down, and in a beautiful, in a very instructive or beautiful way, there just says, now, how are you living? How do you want to live? Live like that. Live like that. That's freedom. No constraint. That's the Zen way. The Mumon Zen way. Okay, so I hope I realize, some of these Zen one, I read them and I'm like, oh, that sounds a little a little strong or a bit edgy, so I wonder how it lands. But I hope you found something of interest or encouragement. Often in Zen, it's about having the rug pulled out from under you. It's like where what you think you understand gets rug pulled, and that's very healthy, because it's just there's nothing to rest on. It's this now. It's how you live now that's important. In the time that's left, I'd love to open it up to question, to comment, to any feedback, anything that you'd like to share or raise up. Please feel encouraged to use the raise hand function or just wave it wildly above your head. Thank you. Oh, thank you all. Oh, we kind of ran over. I started ranting at the end. Sorry about that. I did drop in the chat my homegrown, I don't even remember where I picked this up, but the link works so that we can offer some dana to our organization so we can continue to hold meetings. So please bear that in mind. Again, great pleasure always to sit with you and to see you all. So I look forward to next time. I hope you enjoy the rest of this Sunday evening. Please be healthy in body and mind and spirit. Take good care of yourself as you do others, and I'll see you soon. Thank you.